What is going on, family? It is all UK ball on Heavy Pour Sports. We got me, Rando, Salena from All UK Ball, and T-Step from Border Rivals. How y'all doing?
Good. How are you today?
Good.
Oh, we're doing great.
He's
Looking
already
forward to
up.
this. Yes. Yeah, I guess we go and clear the air now. Last time we were all together, we were prepping for the Sweet 16, and
things got a little heated. Things got a little heated.
Nah, it wasn't hot.
But it's
just
all
good.
Good.
Yeah, it was good conversation. Good conversation.
But yeah, we were we were going over individual matchups. Kentucky was 2-0, two just great wins over Tennessee, and I was a little bit nervous. Salena was confident, and that game was not good if you were a Kentucky fan. T, I know you were happy. I will continue to say we got to the same weekend. Who cares? Y'all got to play one more game, and I thought that was going to be Z's last basketball game, but he's currently trying to sue his way back into college basketball.
He needs to let it go. He's got to let it go.
I love it. He has got the Kentucky fans so spun up. Just to be clear, your boy Brea has played significantly more games than him. So, like half your team or something was comprised of fifth-year players last year. So I don't know why y'all freaking out about Zakai, other than the fact that you're scared of Zakai, which is fair.
No one's scared of Mighty Mouse.
Hey, then why do y'all care if he comes back? But y'all care.
But to be fair, it's not even the fact that it's the fact that he's suing to come back. Like that's the part that. But why? What's he gonna do? Just play another year of college basketball? Like what's the point?
Well, I do have to. I'm gonna have to interrupt your argument here. We'll get back to it. But we are excited to announce the guest on the show today. We got awesome hookup from a friend of ours. Former collegiate baseball player, graduate, and Hall of Famer from the University of Montevallo in Central Alabama. Spent 8 years working with the Southeastern Conference, where he was responsible for the day-to-day publicity of SEC men's basketball and media director for men's SEC basketball tournament. Following his time at the SEC, he was hired by the University of Kentucky. Shout out. Where he spent over 12 years with UK. He held positions of Director of Media Relations, Liaison to the SEC and the SEC Network. He oversaw Kentucky's men's basketball program, considered to be the right-hand man of Coach Calipari. During his time with UK, 11-year stretch, the lead for all schools in NCAA tournament wins with 31, with the 2012 championship, 4 Final Fours, 7 Elite Eights, 8 Sweet 16s. In 2020, unfortunately, Kentucky lost him, and he was hired at DePaul University out of Chicago as the athletic director. And in July of 2021, he added the title of University Vice President to his resume. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. DeWayne Peevy.
Hey,
Sir, how you
how's
doing?
it going?
How are you?
Doing great. Now that was a different intro than I've heard in a while, right? You went all the way back to Montevallo and college baseball and made your way to
Hey,
DePaul.
you
I
see
sounded very old in
Hall of Fame?
that.
No. If you see Hall of Fame in the resume, you got to shout that out for sure.
Well, I appreciate that.
100%.
I appreciate that. Sounds good.
Yeah.
Good to catch up with you guys. Looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. Thank you again. We appreciate your time. We know you're busy. I think you just got back from Big East Media Days or something with the conference.
Yeah, we had our Big East meetings. Like SEC's having their meetings now. We had our Big East meetings last week. So we're the week before. We're in Ponte Vedra, Florida. So I went to Destin, Florida for 20 years when I was at the SEC office and Kentucky. And so at least I still, my wife, she was like, where do we go for league meetings? Make sure you can take this job at DePaul. So at least I still get to go to Florida every year for the league meetings. So we just came back from that last week.
Okay. I went to school in Tampa at USF.
Okay.
For some time, and my wife's family's in Bradenton, so familiar with the area very, very well. I will say, as a USF alum, perfectly fine that UCF job didn't work out for you. Perfectly okay. Orlando's the armpit of Florida anyway, so don't worry about it.
Hey, it was a learning experience. That was probably my first public failure, so to speak, but honestly, when I look back on it, it was such an opportunity to get to a point of being considered. That was my first ever athletic director interview. So to get to the finalists and get that far in it, having no idea, they're just a testament to, being a part of the Kentucky family, being a part of Mitch Barnhart's tree and the credibility that brings to even get me into the mix of it. And then at that point, hopefully the training and things I learned in my time there, because that was, if I'm not mistaken, that was kind of right in our 2014-15 season, right? So it was like that. So things were rolling. We had a great football start to the season. I think we were like 4 or 5-0 to start. We had just came off, a championship, appearance. Trying to make another Final Four run, and so like things are really hot at Kentucky. So that tends to lend off and help the others around too. That's always a great time when people are trying to get a piece of the success we were having as a department at that time. And so I was just in a long line, with Rob Mullins and Mark Coyle that just before me had left, Scott Strickland before I actually came to Kentucky. We were having a nice run of administrators at Kentucky going out and getting their own AD job. So I was kind of riding the coattails a little bit, getting an opportunity, and that was my first run. And obviously the things I learned during that search helped me get to DePaul today.
Yes, sir. So talking about your DePaul job, you took it in the middle, like in the heart of a global pandemic. COVID-19 is happening. You take over, and can you talk through how you navigated, taking on the step of being a D1 athletic director? I think you're also like getting your MBA from Kentucky and Louisville at the same time. So
Right.
navigate all of that. And did it actually, in the long run, make you more efficient in your job because of having to do things remote and whatnot, or isolated, I should say?
While I was going through the time, and it seemed a little crazy, right? So I had made the choice with the University of Kentucky's help to start on my MBA. I was an accounting major that ended up working in the kind of communications field, was kind of my background. But, I was trying to figure out, I talked to Dr. Capilouto, and I was thinking about just, maybe just taking a few classes, working on my master's little by little. But he really told me to go out there and challenge myself. He said when he went to Harvard, that was kind of challenging himself and what led him to be a university president. And so my take on that was, all right, instead of just getting my master's in the easiest way possible, finding something I could take the least amount of things, I was like, let's go get my MBA. And that's kind of when this whole started. So I ended up doing that, in the fall of 19, going into the 2020, 1920 season when all this stuff is starting to happen. And, I get a job in the middle of it. I thought maybe after I got my MBA completed, maybe that was the time for me to be looking for a new job. Not in the middle of it. And obviously that happened in COVID season, a great basketball season where we finished first in the league by 3 games. We're really talking about our team is coming together toward the end. Guys like, Tyrese and, was, kind of coming to his own, and Emmanuel Quickly, we were having such a fun year to be able to end. I tell people all the time, this whole stretching years out and waivers and COVID years, my man Nate Sestina didn't get any of that, right? It was like he got no chance to finish and play the postseason, but all these other people are still playing. That might have been around then, it seems like. But, that was the thing for me. My lasting memory as far as being a part directly in that Kentucky family was that, right? So coming out of it, the hard part was being alongside Mitch and working on how do we get through this from a budget standpoint, right? We all thought we were going home, from the SEC tournament. Mitch was on the men's basketball selection committee at that time. So I was running running point at the SEC tournament. I was the one that decided when we got to go home because he was in seclusion. And so being a part of those meetings, being the AD on site, as a deputy was really cool for me in time to make some of these decisions on the fly because I've always been able to lean on him directly where I couldn't contact him on some of this stuff. So whether that was bringing our women's golf team off the course, I think they were in Phoenix and told them they need to head home, tell gymnastics they need to head home and not even the unknown. The easy part was telling my family, don't come to Nashville, right? Because they were on their way. But we went all home that day thinking it was all right. The NCAA tournament's still going to happen. The worst case when it got to it, we're going to all be home for 2 weeks later. And, student athletes and staff never really returning and we all going home. And, my MBA program was halted. I had an international trip and all that stuff never happened that summer. And really, as a university, just coming to our choices now is how do we work on these budgets? With all these revenues that's going to be stopped in that summer, right? Before DePaul came along, that was what I was really doing because I was supervising our CFO, Melissa Gleason, at the time. And so I'm in these conversations to figure out how do we going to function in this new world where all our revenue streams are kind of on pause because we don't have events, we don't have fans, we don't know what's coming in the fall. That was a great introduction for me to the world I was about to enter into. Right. And so then the DePaul job opened up in the summer. Obviously, I moved into the job in September of 20. But keep in mind, the impact of that was not only am I still got a whole year of my MBA program, but I was able to still finish it because it's hybrid now. Right. Which wouldn't have been the case if it wasn't for COVID. Two, my final interview was on my anniversary. So that was always a good sign. I even told the committee, I said, don't ruin my anniversary. Give me this job. That was on August 7th. And then I think the hard part was I never got to have a real kind of going away at that time because we were already home. Right. And we were planning something the last week of August before I took off to start September 1. But then right after my press conference here, my family got COVID, not me, but everybody else in my family got COVID, which meant between the contact tracing and all that stuff that was going on back then, I was the worst one. I had to stay 14 days out. Everybody else got to go out and do things, right? But that canceled the party. And so obviously we had a chance to kind of redo that at some time down the line, a year or two later. But it's not the same because you don't get to say goodbye, right? Right. I've already left. And by the time people start coming back, a place that meant so much to me and my growth. Mitch gave me a heck of an opportunity back in 2008 when I thought I'd hear something that was pretty cool. Like you think about it, we're at football media days and I know all the media staff that I'm going to work with because I've been at the SEC so long. I'm actually at SEC media days. The staff's asking me, what have you heard? And they're telling me I'm going to hear something by Wednesday probably. And now I know a little bit how that works on this side, but I didn't hear anything. And I go all the way to Monday. I haven't heard anything. At this point, I'm assuming I didn't get it because if you think you're going to hear something on Wednesday and you don't hear anything through the whole weekend, you're kind of coming to grips with the fact that it's probably not going to work out. So then I get the call from Mitch on Monday. I'm dropping my son off, who's about 15 months old at the time, at my mom's house. And Mitch is talking to me, and I'm not really paying attention to what he's saying because I know he's just doing the courtesy call to turn me down, and because I'm obviously in the SEC office, I know him. I'm really appreciative that he's calling me and versus me getting some email or something like that. But I remember actually telling my mom, I think they just offered me the job. I mouthed that to my mom because I'm on the phone. I'm like, he was doing a lot of small. I told him all the time, I don't know why you're doing all that small talking and talking about all these different things without starting up front with the big hitter. Let me know, hey, you're offering me the job because I'm not paying attention at all. But I remember that moment, and there was a lot of life-changing things. That's the first time I'm really leaving home. right? I've been in Birmingham, Alabama area for 35 years, and we up and moved to Kentucky, and it's really life-changing. My kids pretty much grew up there. And so it's a time that I look back to with, very favorable. And COVID interrupted it and kind of helped me start a new era, but it ended up becoming a good breaking point, right? Because who knows what would have happened in different set of circumstances, but it was a challenge, coming into this in a new world. I do think it helped me just as much coming into a new job versus being my predecessor in her era to my era. It was really like the post-COVID era. That's what I was, because everything changed rule-wise, right? We went into this first year. This is my 5th year in the job, and every season has been a different set of rules. The first year we're dealing with COVID. I didn't see my senior staff. I'm about to have a leadership retreat next Monday and Tuesday, and we had the same similar thing the summer of 21, and that was the first time I saw my senior staff all in person. I'd been there since September, right? That's just what COVID would do your first year. You got a bunch of Zooms. People were like, I didn't realize you were this tall, right? Because they'd never seen me in person, right? Those are the things you had in the first year. And so then you get to year 2. You start in year 2, it's the new NIL era starts in the summer of 21, right? And then it really gets going because the transfer portal combination of it the next year. And then the next year after that, all right, you're really into transfers can do it more. They can do it as much as they possibly can, right? And then it leads you into this new NCAA model we're having right now. And so I'm ready for some simplicity. I'm ready for some rules to stay locked in and some guardrails, and I know what the rules are. The great thing about it, I've been in it 5 years, but like the people that have been in 30 years, they don't have any advantage over me because we're all dealing with new stuff every day. Yeah. And I think that made the first 5 years easier because we're all on an even playing field. And so it's been a great run. I'm full Chicagoan now. I went all the way back to Kentucky and sold my car. I'm like a full city boy now. I live a half mile away from the office. And so I'm used to the weather. I think Kentucky helped me, like going a little bit north, getting a little snow. I think you guys have had more snow in Lexington than I've had here in my 5 years. I don't know if it's global warming or the lake effect or whatever, but it hasn't been too bad. But so I'm still surviving, but things have been good.
Yes, sir. We're definitely I know we have some questions about NIL and the new kind of way of if it's going. But before I get there, I want to be selfish and ask like a Kentucky specific question. And so BBN lives and dies by college basketball, right? Lives and dies by. Yes, we're good in other programs, but basketball is what like breads are butter, right? Butter's our bread.
I knew exactly what you meant.
Anyway, you got me, man. I appreciate you. Thank you. You make fun of me. But so when you get there in 2008, towards the end of y'all stop laughing at me. Towards the end of 2008, the end of the Gillespie years, basketball is kind of sputtering a little bit, and you got to make us be part of a decision, and Mitch Barnhart to make a splash hire, and it leads to Calipari in 2009. You fast forward to 2024, we kind of find ourselves in the same boat, Mitch Barnhart in the same spot, a little bit different scenario, but we got to find a new coach to kind of rejuvenate Kentucky basketball. I know you've had to make some difficult decisions in coaching hires as well. What do you look into for a Kentucky program? What do you look at? What's the process of finding the person who you know can be successful because they're a good coach, but also can handle the stress that comes with being a Kentucky head basketball coach?
Well, not to speak. Obviously, I haven't been there 5 years, but I assume a lot hasn't changed because I'm still watching it from afar. I'm a graduate, right? So I've got another stake in it outside of my 12 years, right? So I think it's a unique place, and it always will be, and it's because of the fans and the interest and how much it means to the state and the people involved. The alumni involvement has always been great and was a challenge for me when I was there, right? That was our biggest challenge. How do we get more people connected and everybody feel like they're a part of this? Mainly because we've had so many coaches and we've had so many championship coaches, right? It's not just like we've had a lot of turnover. We've had a lot of championship coaches. To make all of them feel like you're a part of it was always a challenge. And that's probably how I got to know a lot of the alums in my time there, trying to be that, that conduit for it. Like, with Mark Pope, a perfect example. I got to know Mark because remember when we brought the '96 team back and give them championship rings because they never got a UK ring. You know, that video where Mark rips off the stuff when he's at and shows his, does his all his chant and all that. That was a video Mark sent to me. So like,
that gets pushed out all the time now.
Oh yeah, so that was like that was a video that was on my phone. It's how it originated before we played it in Rupp that day, and so that's kind of how our relationship grew. I actually saw Mark in Phoenix, and we caught up. And I was like, hey, we got to get together this summer. Let's talk. Little I know he was gonna be a little busy because he was taking a new job coming from BYU. But I do think when you think about, you've got to have the right kind of person that wants to embrace the challenge of being a part of the community. There got to be people that can't be standoffish. They can't sit in their corner office and hey, my job is just win ball games and nothing else, right? I think you're such an ambassador for so many people and being connected. And I think that's the thing that, that Mark's done a great job of, obviously him knowing what he's getting into, but it's even different than he ever experienced as a player, right? And I think Cal did a great job of that coming in too. And being a chance to see that, one up close and personal and once from afar, also I saw the Billy Gillespie era too, being at the league office when that happened, it's a different challenge, a different world. But one thing that's been consistent is the interest, not just the Kentucky fans, but everybody cares. I mean, I would agree at the time, we always talk about we're not just move the needle, you are the needle, right? And I think as things go and its flow, it's a topic of discussion right now, not just the finish of the season, but the upcoming season, the team you're putting together and how people look at it, and they're going to be interested how this plays out because it can have an effect on everything else, whether it's the scheduling, the matchups, the makeup, going from, where you used to, in my time, dealing with a bunch of people that knock against us, was like, we got one and done. People are not there long enough. Now there's like a given for people, right? Like, like you might lose everybody on the team, right? And it's not even to the NBA anymore where you just keep following them and they're yours. They can end up going to another college team some now. We're dealing with that, right? So, I think that's one of the mainstays, and I think that gives you, an edge. When I got to DePaul, the biggest things I was trying to impact is take my time at Kentucky and show, okay, hey, here's the things I know that we had every day that other people can have, but there's certain things you just can't duplicate automatically, the interest, right? I knew I could play a game on Saturday. I don't care if it was bread buttered steak, like it was going to be a bunch of people there. I don't care. The after Christmas game was going to be lights out because people had interest because the demand was so high that people hadn't even gone to a game. Think about the advantage of that. And now, because of the way you can buy tickets, used to be if you didn't know a season ticket holder, how could you even get into Rupp? Right now, because of the way things are, everybody can live that dream. Even if I don't want to have a season ticket, there's a price I can pay to go to any sporting event across the country. And that's just changed the dynamic where for us on our business side, the season ticket holder has so much value because it's revenue you can count on from year to year. And as that becomes more of a challenge because people want to just pick where they can go because they can do that, we're trying to make sure that we equate some value to being a season ticket holder, play more home and homes. You're seeing that kind of happen more. The multi-team events, and you're going to probably see those kind of dissipate a little bit as we grow the conference, grow the non-conference schedules. You're seeing more teams. Even the exhibition games are getting better. I mean, saw you guys that got Georgetown. I'm like, how are you going to bring a Big East team to Rupp and not bring Depaul and DeWayne? And we got Chris Holtman, a Lexington guy too. Like, we got to come back. We should be coming back for a homecoming, not like one of our peers. But we'll talk about that offline. But I think those are the things that you work on. Right. We'll work on that. We'll make sure Mark gets this right. We got to call in some favors. I didn't know that was a possibility. Right now, you just got to come to Wintrust first. Right, that's what we'll do. But I think
you
the
did say
dynamic
in your
of
initial press conference that you wanted a home game against Kentucky.
Yeah, I was working on it. Cal said, he promised my president, Gabriel Esteban, when I got the job, he said that, if we hire him, and then we'll play him. We'll play you guys in home and home. And then I came to him. I said, all right, we got to get this game done. And then my president ended up retiring. He's like, this is not my fault. I didn't have anything to do with that. Like, I promised him. He's not there anymore. So I got to work other ways. So we were close to playing Arkansas actually last year because they were looking for games, but we had to start on the road. We were finished. And I think there's an opportunity, especially as more people play more games. I think we're talking about a possibility of adding a 30-second game next year and everybody trying to figure out what they do there. Everybody loves to come to Chicago, so that helps us a little bit in some of our scheduling. But as we get more competitive and better, I think we'll have an opportunity, whether that's Kentucky or some others, to play. But I do think, just getting back to the overall question, you got to be a special kind of person that embraces that challenge, where I look at it as pressure is a privilege. It's something I enjoy, right? I could get bored easily. And like now I'm in this challenge right now where I'm trying to take a team that was last place in the Big East coming in and trying to make them not just get out of last, but be a tournament team year in and year out. That's a great challenge. And it doesn't feel like pressure. It's fun, right? And I think that's bought out of, being at Kentucky every day to know if I have a bad day, a really bad day, it's on the bottom line. It's not just something like I get to go home and tell my wife, Allison, about. Like, everybody knows that you've messed up or you've lost a game. Or I still haven't watched any Kentucky loss. Of all the highlights and games I go back to watch, I got halfway through the West Virginia loss with the John Wall team, and that's the closest I've got. We were winning by 1.5, but I couldn't watch the rest of it. I tried to make myself, because I can't, you know how you try to have the memories of it? I tried to make myself watch it just to figure out what the hell happened, because I don't even remember. It's like I got to go to therapy to pull it out to figure out what happened in these games, but I couldn't even get through half because I knew we were going to lose, and I couldn't do it. So, and I still and so like those are the things. I don't like the Celtics either because
I don't.
But I do think you got to have somebody special that wants to embrace it, because the fans is such an asset. You want to be around it. You want to be in the community. It doesn't have to have somebody pull you into it, because we all got staff that'll make us go do things. But I think you got to have that internal desire that this is part of the job. And if the time runs out, then maybe you can't do that forever. It might wear you out, because it is a lot coming at you. Like I'm a Duca hazard because of my time at Kentucky. Like I got that up in my house, my home office, right? But I think that's a part of it. You got to have somebody. The basketball stuff, you're going to always have the opportunity to hire somebody that can coach and recruit. All right, that could be a great leader of men, but you've got to have the right person that understands what it means to be in that seat. And I think you've got a really good one in Mark Pope.
I agree.
Yes, sir. We agree. All right, I'm going to go to T. Yeah, I'm going to go to T now, the resident Tennessee fan of the show. I will like to point out.
That's the hard questions. I saw that when I first got on. Yeah. When I was behind the scenes and I couldn't see, I'm like, what is this, a setup? I didn't know what was going on.
You were 17-27 over your tenure with basketball against Tennessee. So that's a 62% win record, I believe. But on that note, we'll pass it over to T.
Hey, Mr. Peevy, how you doing? It's nice to get to talk to you.
Same here.
Hey, we actually got up to Chicago about the same time. When I was in the Marine Corps, I got stationed up at Great Lakes, so North Chicago.
Okay.
But I got there July of 2020, so we got up to Chicago about the same time. And being from the South, I was nervous about Chicago. Big city and all that. Now COVID kind of helped, but I found Chicago very different than New York. The people were much more welcoming, much nicer, and all that. So,
I'd say that too.
One question about Depaul, how much do you get to engage with Quentin Richardson? Because I grew up during the Knuckleheads era, so I used to love watching him and Darius Miles. How engaged with Depaul? Because he talks about Depaul on his show all the time, so I would assume he's engaged. But how much do y'all get to interact with him?
Well, it was ironic. Before he able to get on ESPN, where we get to see him all the time now, we actually worked it out where we're invited back. We're really trying to focus on getting our most prominent NBA alums kind of back in the fold. And obviously Quentin and Rod Strickland were two of them that hadn't been back connected in a while. Obviously I had a little bit of connection with Rod because of Kentucky, and now him being a college coach. And then so I started out really trying to bring Mark Aguirre and Terry Cummins back in the fold, right? And there are obviously two retired jerseys that we have in there, in the arena. Terry was the first one that I've retired, his jersey in the rafters. And then we did Dave Corzine this past year. But really we had this dinner at the Big East tournament this year. So we had Quentin and his family, his wife and his sister-in-law are twins, and they had a birthday while we were at the Big East tournament. We made him the Big East legend this year. That was the first big public him being back at DePaul was this year. And, you know, it was great because we had all those guys at dinner that night. So it was Rod, Quentin, Terry Cummins, Dave Corzine, Mark Aguirre couldn't make it because he's out sick, Kevin Edwards, who's, you know, been on our staff. And it was a great party. We got a great picture of it. We ended up losing one of our alums, just passed away, you know, during the Easter weekend that helped kind of put that together. And, you know, Malik Murray, and, you know, really just a shout out to him and his family. He had just passed away at, you know, basically 50 years old, but he was a big proponent and really, you know, basically Quentin kind of grew up with their family. And I'm so glad that we were able to get to that point while Malik was around, because it's, you know, we sat there that night and so we got to count our blessings. We got to do more together. We got to get around each other and not be when the people pass away at funerals. We need to be together in the time to celebrate. And I'm really glad we kind of got across that bow, because I know that meant so much to Malik to get kind of Quentin back involved. And, you know, and so we're hoping to kind of capitalize off that because he means so much, especially with that era for us. You know, we haven't been to tournament since 2004. So we look at, you know, those late 90s, early 2000s, that group is kind of the last kind of the fun group that people see successful. Wilson Chandler was kind of the last of that kind of group. You know, but, you know, seeing Quentin and Bobby Simmons, who's here locally here, and those guys, what they do, we're trying to get guys more involved. And so, you know, Quentin now being out there on ESPN for us, being a voice in every show, you see the background picture, ESPN the magazine with him in his DePaul jersey or the Slam magazine stuff. That's great for us. And it's now, how do we take that opportunity to the next level and start making sure because that's the one thing that a connection between Kentucky and DePaul for me is the blue blood status of their alums, right? I didn't even realize as many people went to DePaul as did when I was looking into the job. Like all these people that I was fans of, I had no idea because I didn't watch them in college, you know, but realized that how many of these NBA guys all went to DePaul, right? You know, obviously the Quentin Richardsons of the world you knew and the Mark Aguirres, but there's a lot of people in between. When I look at our hallway, we got a ton of NBA alums, and that reminded me a little bit of my old Kentucky home a little bit, you know, just you can continue to follow. And so that's one of the things that kind of the first task I took in Lexington, I kind of took here is like really getting people to give back and get back around, be present, not for fundraising efforts, for like I call it friend raising. We need more of our folks back. This is where everybody see. That's who they know. And if we can get them back, people will trust us enough to like, okay, these guys are back. I need to come back too. Because we used to sell out Rosemont Arena. You know, we moved out of, you know, Lincoln Park out there to Allstate Arena and putting 18,000 every game, right? And so now we're back in the city, and we need to get some of those folks and those old fans back in the flow. And so that's kind of why, you know, we've been getting connected to be those ambassadors to us, because that's the glory days. Those were things where people were happy and excited in basketball, and DePaul in the cool uniforms, and everybody wanted to be a DePaul player, and that's how they grew up watching on WGN. You know, that's not the end result, but that group of fans, we don't want to lose them. We want to get them back in the fold so we can add these new fans too. But Quentin's been great, you know, and a great ambassador for us, you know, from the social media side with the podcast. You know, you see all these podcasts now, you know, they were doing that when everybody wasn't, right? Correct. And then that's led to him being on ESPN too. And so I'm proud of him and what he's done, and we'll continue to keep building on that relationship and see how it grows.
That's awesome. All right, my AD based question, and I know it'll be a little different coming from like Kentucky, but I value your insight. So typically football is, you know, kind of the cream of the crop, and that's where a school tends to focus a lot. So from an athletic director's office standpoint, how is effort kind of focused between, because obviously an AD doesn't get to just focus on the school's primary sport. You know, you do have to focus on, like you were talking about, golf and gymnastics and crew and archery, or, you know, whatever else the school has. So how do AD offices manage kind of those focuses of effort between what their primary effort might be with like basketball at Kentucky or football at Tennessee, and then all the other sports that matter to the school, but maybe not as much, I don't know, to the fan base or something?
I mean, I think that's an easy transition for me. I think just part of that, just being 12 years at Kentucky under Mitch Barnhart, you know, as much as we were, you can be a basketball school and you're trying to be at this level of football. And I'm not trying to bring up an old argument, but I think Kentucky was one of the things trying to be an everything school. We try to win national championships in every sport, right?
Yeah.
And so, my biggest love was seeing our football program grow to where people think we couldn't even compete in the SEC, to being one step away from getting into that SEC championship game. And now, I imagine the biggest thing is like, how do we make that step forward to get in the college football playoff, right? And that's a reality where maybe when I was at the SEC office watching it from afar, that wasn't something that was going to happen, right? I probably got the Kentucky job because I kept, we were doing instant replay. Every SEC game had to be where somebody from the office had to be there. I got to go to Kentucky a lot because nobody was picking going to the Kentucky games, right? And so I went up there and I was getting to know people. That's probably what helped me get the job. But now that's a totally different world and what we've done from the program, from a facility standpoint, budget standpoint, coaching, all that. But I think that's the same approach I'm coming here is that, yes, I want to use the things that people assert themselves with. Our history in men and women's basketball is great. But we went to 4 Women's College World Series in softball, right? We've been a great tennis program. I've got, my 5 years, I've got 3 men's tennis Big East championships because we've been really good at that. I'm trying to elevate our track program to where we were on the podium for 2 runner-up finishes behind UConn last weekend. And we've got 12 athletes at regionals at Texas A&M right now. Like, I'm coming in with that mentality that's not different for me because that's what I've learned in my time at Kentucky. With Mitch is that we can be really good at everything. And so when I left the Big East meetings, like I'm really thinking like, how do we hold pat in this changing world, trying not to cut sports or cut scholarships or cut operating from the Olympic sports or, non-revenue sports just to feed the other pieces, right? That's just not something I'm into. For me, that's the time for me to go do something else, right? Because I think it's my job to make sure that everybody can eat, right? And everybody grow. Like I've got to make basketball work at a high level for my university and my athletic department, but it shouldn't be at the expense of anybody else. I've got to make choices. I mean, there's investment dollars that's got to go one way or the other, but the easy route, in my opinion, is all right, let's own my mistake and let's go cut this to feed this. To me, I don't think that's going to work, but that's just a byproduct of probably seeing the success that I saw in Kentucky for 12 years of how you can be really good at everything. You just got to have the right people, the right investment, actually put the time and effort and caring into it. And that's kind of what I'm trying to create here at DePaul.
So is there like senior level staff, like
Yeah.
you have a staff member dedicated, like, someone who works?
Yeah, like I had an opportunity for basketball. Yeah, so I have sport administrators for every sport. I only have 15 sports here, and I have 10 kind of head coaches, right? Because track's like 6 of them. And so I have a sport administrator for every sport. So when I came in, I know I'm going to be my best when all 10 of those head coaches feel like that I equally care about them, right?
Yeah.
But I also have to extend myself. So I have, anywhere from 6 to 8 on a given year sport administrators, one that allow them to grow just like I got a chance to grow if they want to move on and be something else. But it allows me to give more time and effort to it. So, I have one for men's basketball, women's basketball, and every other sport. But I can bring a lot to the table based on my own experiences. So when I left Kentucky, I was doing men's soccer and men's basketball. Obviously when I SEC times, I was spending a lot of time. I was working with women's soccer and softball too, and men and women's golf. So I've got background in other sports. But I do think that's the greatest way to kind of see if people have that potential of doing more or being an athletic director at some point. Some people don't want to do that job. Some people think, maybe the number 2, the deputy job might be the best job. And sometimes I think about that too, when it gets pretty hard, like, man, I had it really good. But, it gives you a chance to kind of have to make some decisions and, I always felt like I didn't need to run to Mitch with everything, right? I need to take things off his plate. I don't need to add to his desk because he's got enough to deal with. I felt like I could help him the most by taking as much of, at the time, Calipari and men's basketball. You get to make the fun decisions. You get to, I'll take the hard stuff away because I'm not doing much. If I got to come to him every time, what am I really doing? All right. And so that's the same approach I've challenged my sport administrators is I've actually got a handbook to define what I need their job to be. Right. I don't need you to not tell me anything and I don't know what's going on, but I also don't need you bringing everything to me because that doesn't do me any good. So I need to know about everything, but I don't need to be in the middle of everything, right? Because it ultimately is my responsibility. And obviously I need to know what's going on everywhere, but really trying to define what the jobs are. And I think it's helped people grow, right? You know, that opportunity that I had at Kentucky, I want to give that to other people too. I definitely thought you were going to hit me with the. Yeah, I thought
exactly.
I thought you were definitely going to hit me with, you know, Danny White beat me out for the UCF job, but you probably didn't do your research on that to know.
well, when Rando mentioned how UCF didn't work, I was like, oh, well, our guy, that must have been our guy. So I put two and two together, but I'm just trying to learn. I might find a way to rip you here and there, but I'm just trying to kind of learn from you right now. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Cool.
Now,
but how you explained it,
go ahead, T. Go ahead. Yeah.
I was just about to say that exactly how you described it is how we are taught and trained in the Marine Corps. Like as junior officers, we're given pretty wide left and right lateral limits, and we're supposed to keep our commander informed. But the whole reason that they give us those wide left and right lateral limits is so that we have the authority to make decisions without having to come to them with everything, and then we can just kind of back brief them. Let them know what we did, why, how it's benefiting the entire battalion or whatever. So that's the way you explain that computes with my fairly smooth brain. So
yeah. The simple Marines here, we're like, makes sense, perfect.
Yeah.
But all right, Salena, I know you got some NIL questions for him.
I do. So obviously you were at UK whenever they played UConn and everything, and then the comments were made about athletes being hungry, and now we're in the era where athletes are making a ton of money, right? So how has that transition been for you, coming from that era to this era, and how has that been? Because I'm sure that's been a change for fans even too.
Right.
So what's it been like from your side?
Yeah, I do remember that time when we were trying to fight over, can we provide them spread for their bagel? I do remember that.
Yep.
It hadn't been that long ago, right? I mean, we were having arguments. Well, we can give them the bagels, but we can't provide them with the spread. Like that was illegal, right? So we've come a long way there. I think, but I'm in favor of it. I was in favor of it before I left because I feel like, especially when I was dealing with a bunch of athletes that had a brand, had a name and a likeness that they couldn't make money off of. We would see it after guys got done, and autograph signings and things like that would be the first time. But I do feel like the combination of the NIL with the transfer portal was something people didn't forecast, that it would create this free agency, and the lack of accountability. I thought a fair space might be able to let people do it, one time, or because sitting out is not much. But when you really think about it, I mean, I can switch schools. Why can't they? Presidents can switch, and maybe it's not, dealing with it so much. I do think as you get there as a young man or a young woman, and you pick a school and you have some false sense of what it is, and you get there and the reality sets in, it might be a little different. And I don't think a lot of people realize that, like, sports like baseball always had where a freshman could transfer without sitting out. It wasn't something that was new to NCAA. It was just new in football and basketball, right? It was new in the sports that everybody knew about. So these things have been happening for other sports where they didn't have to sit out, and track and field the same way. But it was just coming to a different era, and these were the ones that were actually producing revenue. And so, I think it's at DePaul, we're in the third largest media market in the country. We try to sell that where we're going to teach you how to manage your money. We're going to teach you how to make the most out of it. We're not going to be the highest payer. We're not, when I'm putting my staff together, I'm not trying to attract the people that are going to come for the most money, right? I'm trying to find the best talent that I can develop that's going to be able to be, have the opportunity or the choice if they want to advance in athletics and go out there and help change the world. And so we want to, if I'm talking to Chris Holtman, I'm trying to build a roster or trying to help him. Is that don't make it as transactional as it feels like it is from the outside. You got to have that mutual interest or want to be together. And we're doing a little bit of speed dating here, right? It's not like before where you're recruiting somebody when they're in high school and you get to meet the family and you go on a home visit and they make several visits to the campus. I mean, some of these transactions are happening on a Zoom meeting. So we got to do a lot more to figure it out, because livelihood is this thing. It's still a business element to some of this, right? So people getting hired and fired because of the success of building a roster just as much as it is the wins and losses coming out of it. And so I've tried to ask our coaches to challenge it like you did before, we should be concentrating on trying to get the same recruits that we should be getting, knowing that we're elevating our program. And then let's let the transactional piece handle itself, right? If there's a mutual interest here, and this is a person that we think could be good for our program and we're a good place for them, the other part will become easy. Because if you go in with this transactional thought, and somebody's got this crazy number that doesn't make any sense to you, this person's not worth this, you're already thinking negatively before you even meet them in person. They got to overcome that. And if you're all in that spot, yeah, you can tell them like, hey, what are you looking for to make sure you're not wasting your time? But to ultimately make that decision, maybe they like you a little bit more too, and they might be willing to come in closer to what your value is, and you can have a better conversation than handling all that up front when you really haven't had a chance to talk. You're liable to not met in their family or really talk to them, or it's definitely not in person. I think that's a better way from a business standpoint. And I mean, there's a lot of overpaying going out there right now because people are panicking. There's just so much at stake. I think the biggest thing I want coaches to not get lazy in this, right? This is not the time that's like, well, I don't have to put this much effort in it. I don't have to do as much traveling. I can save money. I can just do this by watching stats and online. I mean, they're not doing that in the NBA, and it's professional. They got a whole scouting service that's out there looking at these kids. So we got to bridge that gap a little bit. We're not creating the NBA or the NFL because they have full staffs that are out there evaluating these people before they just make a decision based on how they did stat-wise last year. So this is not time to take stack. It's still going to be hard, especially to me now. You got to put more effort in because now you're putting university dollars behind it, right? If all of a sudden you got $10 million in revenue sharing and basketball and you fail when maybe you had two before that you were fundraising for, then that's a lot at stake. That's a little different. You know, you might not get another crack at it. You definitely might not get another $10 million to try again. And I think there's a little bit of more responsibility in that because you're not going out there making those dollars. So I do think for us, I'm a big proponent of it, but I want life lessons to be learned in this. I'd rather the young people fail on my campus than fail later because we can save them, right? They don't have to use this money for anything right now. So, you know, in the grand scheme of things, we're supposed to be educators, right? They're coming to college to learn. And so in that aspect, the mistakes, they are probably going to be made at some point, but at least if they're doing it here under our purview, they got another chance, right? If you blow $2 million, man, I'd rather you do it now than when you're a pro because you're probably done. You don't have another shot, and I don't know where you're going to end up, right? And so how do we teach them more up front? They're listening more. We've been doing financial literacy, I know, since I been in college, but maybe they didn't pay attention because they didn't have the money. And now we're teaching them not only that, we're teaching them how to invest it. We're teaching them better about it, how to spend, how to say no early on. Because we used to have those conversations. I had a bunch of guys, as you can imagine, that were going to be pros in a year. And so they were paying attention. But their families were looking at this is the golden ticket. Like as soon as you're taking in the lottery, everybody's getting the house. These people are working for you on payroll. And we were telling people that. I remember one of our freshmen that was going to be, you know, a high pick. We're going through this exercise. And he was like, can you do this? Can you present this to my mom? You know, because she needs to hear this for you that she's counting on when I get drafted next year, she get a new house. I need you. So those are the realities. And that was nowhere near the kind of money we're talking about right now up front. Like, keep in mind, they don't have to pay a bunch of bills with this or living expenses, right? This is all free. And so I think it's even more now. And, you know, I'm having a meeting the other day. I'm talking to a lot of different companies because everybody's interested now. They want to get in front. They want to get exposure. These are future clients now. And so we got to be very careful how we walk through this area and what we attach to it because this is an opportunity still, right? Some of us would have never thought. We've been telling you forever we didn't have any of this money. I still don't know how some of this money's showing up because I can't squeeze anything else out of it. So I'm trying to figure out where this money come from. And I spent time 20 years in the SEC, and I don't think this is not a running train where this money just always there, right? You got to figure it out. So I do think getting together, having some rules, however way to get there. Hopefully this settlement gets passed and we have some level of constraints. And so we can all be fighting with some level of guardrails again and just get back to being competitors, right? Because there's enough money to spread around. Everybody not trying to get rich, but I think there's an opportunity to grow and people have a better experience because we're all making a lot of revenue at it. And so I know everybody's been saying that the Big East has got this advantage in basketball because we don't want to do football. We don't have the alumni bases. We don't have the ways to make revenue and money either. And so we're stretching ourselves because we've got to survive. Because if the basketball teams in this league aren't doing really well, the universities take some major steps back because this is the only card we can play. At Kentucky, like football makes a ton of money too, even though like basketball, we always get a lot of fundraising off of it, and it's really been, a traditional thing. The football and the SEC piece, how you divide out those dollars makes a lot of dollars. So at least you got you got two big revenue sports, and then the SEC gets to a point sometimes baseball makes it in some places, right? I got one thing that can make money, and it's got to fund everything else. And so we got to be really good at it. And in this league, whatever advantage we're getting, that's a lot at stake to only have one thing that's got to work, and we're all competing against each other. Somebody's going to be last, right? Somebody's not making the tournament, right? So I think for us, it's just allowing us to play in the game. Like it's allowing us to compete with the other Power 4 schools because we can at least get to the level they're going to invest, right? I mean, it gives us a chance. And so, but I wouldn't say it's an advantage at all. Being in both places, I would love to have the Kentucky fan base, revenue drivers, and money at DePaul. Then that'd be a good advantage, right? Because then I wouldn't have the cap to deal with. But by itself, it's definitely not an advantage.
No, that makes sense. No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, I was just curious because that's a wild jump from no cream cheese to here's a lot of money on your upfront.
Yeah, especially for me too. Like, okay, when I take the job, this doesn't exist. Remember, none of this exists. When I hired my first coach, this doesn't exist. When I hired, I made a coaching change and I hired Tony Stubblefield. There's no NIL. There's no transfer portal, right? You're choosing the coach in a different era too, right? And then now, if we're behind in those things and those assets, it's going to make it hard for anybody to succeed because those are the things that take time. We're in a much better spot now. When I hired Chris Holtman, we're in a much better spot. One, I wasn't on the job 6 months. I was a vice president and part of the president's cabinet. We had grown operating budgets. We had a practice facility project going. We had donors in place and some NIL, and we had none of that on the front end. So it's just a difference of talking about 2 or 3 years, right? But now we're probably more equipped as a university to read the tea leaves, so to speak, and see what's coming versus having to wait and see and then try to adjust and react to it where you're always behind. The people that are going to be successful in this era are going to be the ones that see what's likely going to happen and be on the front end of it, right? And so the trendsetters have always won, right? And so that's what we're trying to be in that mode going forward because now it's a unified front between my coaches, myself, my president, Rob Manuel, and our board of trustees. We are a very unified front right now. And we see where we're trying to go with this, and it allows us to pivot as this changes. And so I'm excited about the next 5 years. Hopefully another pandemic doesn't happen. I'll be good to try to avoid that one. I can deal with the other stuff after how this started. It's kind of downhill right now. It can't get worse than that, right? So, but I'm finally losing some of my COVID seniors, right? The kids that came in with me, they're finally finishing up. And so, which really is what shows you. I'm in my COVID year. This is my 5th year, right? I'm in my COVID year too at DePaul. So, but it's been a good ride. But it needs some stability if we're going to be able to continue watching games and enjoying college athletics. We need a little bit of stability so that we can adjust and make sure this thing continues to grow going forward.
No, yes, sir.
I completely agree.
And they probably didn't predict it was going to be such a benefit when they hired you, but I think you were in charge or had a significant role in the K Fund and managing money in that. It's like there. So I'm sure that time at Kentucky has also helped manage NIL and grow funds and try to find ways to generate revenue. So I imagine that has helped your time as AD and VP at DePaul. I know you don't have a lot of time. I had one more question. It was kind of wrapping all this stuff together with NIL and the transfer portal. There was a study that came out this year. There was a 40% increase in men's basketball going into the transfer portal. I'm sure you've seen the stats, but it was like 2,300 people. 70% of those individuals, and this includes the Big East, either did not get picked up by a different school or had to transfer to what they call a lower tier. Is there a way that we can, I don't know if it's the hearing or the settlement, or if it's, we look at league commissioners, or if it's trying to figure out a way to, bring power back to the NCAA. I'm not sure, but how do you protect athletes and schools from, because athletes are getting bad information that they're being overvalued by their people, or schools are getting poached from these backdoor deals from agents or athletic advisors or whatever they're called, because I know I guess they're not agents or your typical NBA folks or professional agents. Is there a way to protect this, or how do we go about like reining in like you said, the goodness of paying college athletes for their name, image, and likeness, but protecting the athletes in schools from making a career damaging decision?
Well, I think that's twofold. But one, I want to comment on your other point about the K-Fon piece, because it kind of comes into it like, my time of kind of being their supervisor, I learned fundraising, right? And that's been such an asset in this world right now, because we got to go out there and raise monies and deal with donors. I would be remiss if I didn't say thanks to Candace Chaffin and Katie Eisman for showing me the game, so to speak. So when I came here, that was a skill set I could bring right to the table. And I think it's helped even in these negotiations and dealing with people, whether it's transfers or the agents, and dealing with, I'm such a people person at this point right now. So like dealing with people and having conversations with people that talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars is like part of the business, part of the deal right now. And I think, to your question, I think, from an NIL perspective and everything is such an attractor now. Before it was about playing time. Everybody's getting in the portal to get more playing time. I mean, I feel like 99% of the problems I deal with at the background, the root of it is playing time, right? And so keep in mind, a couple of years ago, my whole team went in the portal after our 3-29 season, right? Even the walk-ons. Everybody went in the portal. We didn't push them. We didn't tell them they had to go. Everybody went on to find a greener pasture. And as we're going through this, I'm seeing that some of these guys are not going to end up anyplace without some help. Because if you're not, if you don't have your high school coach or your AAU coach or actually an agent because you're a good enough player and have an NIL agent finding your place, you're probably going to get lost in the shuffle. And that's what's happening with these numbers. But we did a job as I took Peter Tombasco, who's our sport administrator for men's basketball. Obviously, my new staff that's coming in with Chris Holtman and them, they didn't know these kids, so they don't have that relationship. I took it upon myself, Peter and I, along with a couple of different caveats, we tried to make sure these guys found a place, right? And I think that's not happening enough. Like, once you go in, we're done. I get it. We don't owe them anything, but when you come to DePaul, I feel like just like every person that transferred from Kentucky, I still kept in touch with Johnny Juzangs and the Kyle Wilchers, because you came to us, you were my guy. I'm not going to give up on you. I'm going to still check on you just like I check on every other guy that went to pro, right? And I feel like for us, when we had guys go in the portal, you just forget about them and you don't know what they're going through. You're hoping they end up some places. Now, some guys are so good, they're going to have a place, right? Those are not the ones in the numbers. But sometimes people might not make the most informed decision and thinking this is just free agency. It's just something to enjoy. It sounds fun. It sounds exciting. But, none of us would just go out there and quit our job just in knowing I can find something better. We're going to find something better first, right? And they just haven't learned that lesson to a lot of them don't have a place, right? And I know like there's not tampering and all those things, but like there's a better way to figure out like you got some options. And so we might need to look at this model of the transfer portal a little better. Maybe there's an anonymous way for these students to be able to put themselves, because of, where what are you looking for? Because the problem is if I put myself out there anonymously, I'm already tainted to my coach. I'm looking for elsewhere, right? So like there's no easy way to do that. But I think a lot of them are getting a false sense, of what's out there. And, but spending the time, but I think we can do a better job of making sure they land somewhere. And it hurts you from an APR standpoint if they don't land at another Division I school. So like, you don't want them to end up at junior college. You don't want them to end up not playing at all, because that's very possible with those numbers. I'm already right now trying to figure out, I'm trying to plan a luncheon with our portal kids from both men and women's basketball to have 2 separate lunches just to check on everybody, see how everybody's doing. Like, I still got to finish my job. They're still here. They put their blood, sweat, and tears into DePaul while they were here. I want them to finish school the right way. and go to the next place. But even though every one of them on both sides have a place they've committed to, I still want to see through it. But at that point last year, there were several kids at this time that didn't have a place. And so I felt like it was my job to start calling around, because if you don't hear anything, if you don't have any stats, who's trying to pick you up? You don't have any tape. You didn't really play. Yeah. So I was calling people like, hey, I'm just telling you, it's a good kid. He's not looking for money. He's looking for a scholarship. But if you don't have anybody pushing for you, especially a place, because they probably think, all right, well, if he left and he wouldn't do anything, maybe he's a bad kid. Maybe there's problems to it. I don't know what the upside is. Those are the ones that are getting left hanging. So I do think we got to take a little more responsibility of making sure, because if we sign those kids, it's our responsibility, not just that they graduate, but make sure they end up at a good place and they keep going forward. And I think that goes hand in hand, right? So, because I think a lot of them, they're dropping down because they got no other choice, right? But there's a lot of other places that still could have roster spots and they could be, especially if they're ended up at a high major basketball school right now or a high major football program. That's probably a lot more actual choices. And that takes work, but that's responsibility. If we're signing you, we got to have some responsibility to see that through and making sure if you're not going to graduate from my school, you're going to finish up somewhere else. So that's making sure they find a home too.
That's awesome. I mean, that's leadership, right? That's all the way through.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's a perfect way to end this, sir. I do appreciate your time. I would like to close it out. There was a quote that I saw. I don't know if you've seen it before, but it says, DeWayne leaves UK with a lasting legacy. Without question, he has helped lead our program to new heights of success in sports across our campus. But more importantly, he has always put our student athletes first, mentoring them and preparing them to lead lives of meaning and purpose on our campus and in the broader world in which they have been called to serve. Depaul is getting one of the country's finest young athletic administrators and leaders. And that's from our president, Dr. Capilouto. So thinks highly of you. I listen to you speak. I've listened to your podcast. I try to do for that Depaul does. I think the last one you recorded was in December. And I try to do some research. And I listened to you talk. And Tony Dungy wrote a book about mentor leadership. And I hear you talk about the way you take care of these student athletes. And I get that of like, you can't truly be a leader unless you understand the person first. And I think that's a great tool that you have in your personality and a leadership trait that you have. And those people who fall under you, whether it's in your program or the athletes which you are mentoring and the coaches who you allow them to mentor, I think they're blessed to have you. So keep up the great work, sir, and really appreciate your time again.
Well, thank you. So much. And thank you for inviting me to come on. It's always good to tell some fun stories. I appreciate you guys even reaching out. Kentucky is always going to have a soft place in my heart. I got to this spot because of the 12 years I put there, and then I got a son right now that's going out to play football at Western Michigan for his freshman year. And one of his wide receiver new teammates is from Lexington as well. So it's funny that him and Avion, they played 5-year-old basketball together in Lexington, and now they're going to be wide receiver teammates at Western Michigan as freshmen this year.
That's awesome.
Sports is such a connector for people, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I've got lifelong friends in Lexington, and the Big Blue Nation has been always great to me. I still get people watching DePaul games and texting me about DePaul's success that are Kentucky fans, and that's a testament that it goes both ways. I feel like I poured a lot of time and effort in trying to be a man of the people. The people are still connected, and I really appreciate it. I don't take that for granted too. And so I want to thank you guys for giving me a little piece of going back in time, but also hopefully your listeners realize that I really appreciated my time there and appreciate the support they gave me then and still some of them they give me today. So thank you again.
Absolutely. And because of your current seat, I won't ask you this directly. I don't know what Mitch's plans are, but I know Kentucky fans have you on a very, very short list to find your way back to the university if that ever happens to be an opportunity. So again, sir, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all take care. All right.
You too. Hey, that was a good time.
That was. It was a really good time.
That's an outstanding individual. Like it doesn't Doesn't take long to engage with him to realize
Yep.
that's
a lot of knowledge in there.
Yeah,
a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. Yeah.
I hate that y'all get. I hate that y'all get to claim him, but whatever.
He's ours.
Ours. I'll tip my hat to Big Blue Nation for that one.
I told y'all before we started, I was nervous just because we was a hookup that we had. Roy Combs was a friend of ours from the All UK Ball podcast. Yeah, shout out. And he's friends with DeWayne Peevy, and he was like, "Hey, would you like this opportunity?" And I was like, "Absolutely!" And then it actually became real. I sent the email out, and then I got a response back, and I was like, "Didn't expect that to happen." To actually happen. And then like today, I'm finalizing my notes, and I've got writing this stuff down, and I'm like, I don't think I've been this nervous about something in a long time. But he came on as soon as he started talking, and he just carried the conversation. I was like, this is gonna be easy. This is gonna be easy. But and there was still some meat left on the bone too. But I didn't think I didn't know if he had more time or not. But we had gotten to that hour, so I was like, we'll go ahead and make sure get him back to his family in Florida there.
I think that was smart.
Yeah, that was a good time. But all right, y'all, I'll go ahead and end this stream. If you're listening, go follow All UK Ball. Go follow KYSAS _T_step and at the Border Rivals podcast. You can find us on X, YouTube, and I think we even have we
have a TikTok. We have All UK Ball TikTok. Yeah. So
All UK Ball TikTok. There you go. And we need to increase those followers so we can go live on there too.
Actually, it might be
as always.
TikTok. I don't remember.
Either one of them. We'll post it on here.
We'll figure it out.
But appreciate you listening. All UK Ball on Heavy Pour Sports. Go Cats.
Go Cats.
Go Big Orange.
No, go Cats.
I'm about to follow you.